Book of Judges, chapter 7, verses 1 through 8. It's in the Old Testament, as you well know. And we've been talking about Gideon. You should know a little bit about his life and where he's at from our last messages, and I don't want to repeat them today. But we're talking about Judges chapter 7, and we're going to start at Judges chapter 7, verse 1. Then Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, and all the people who were with him rose early and encamped beside the well of Herod. You should underline that word, the well of Herod. It's a very important point in our lesson today. So that the camp of the Midianites was on the north side of them by the hill of Morah in the valley. And the Lord said to Gideon, the people who are with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into your hands. What a statement to make. What a statement. Lest Israel claim victory for itself against me, saying, my own hand has saved me. Now, therefore, proclaim in the hearing of the people, saying, whoever is fearful and afraid, let him turn and depart at once. And of the people, at once from Mount Gilead. And 22,000 of the people returned, and 10,000 remained. Very important figure. And the Lord said, Gideon, the people are still too many. Bring them down to the water, and I'll test them for you there. Then it will be that of whom I say to you, this one shall go with you, the same shall go with you. And whomever I say to you, this one shall not go with you, the same shall not go. So he brought the people down to the water, and the Lord said to Gideon, everyone who laps from the water with his tongue, as a dog laps, you shall set apart by himself. Likewise, everyone who gets down on his knees and drinks. And the number of those who lapped, putting their hand to their mouth, was 300 men. But all the rest of the people got down on their knees to drink water. Then the Lord said to Gideon, by the 300 men who lapped, I will save you and deliver the Midianites into your hand. Let all the other people go, every man to his place. And it happened the same night that the Lord said to him, arise, go down against the camp, for I have delivered it into your valley. Then into your hand. And then I want to move over to 1 Corinthians. Keep your finger there. And I just want to read one verse in 1 Corinthians 2. You can just sit and listen to it. It's the 11th verse of the 10th chapter. It says, now all these things happened to them as examples, and they were written for our admonition, on whom the ends of the ages have come. Now, this phase of Gideon's story is definitely a lesson on faith in spite of what you see. This is a good lesson for that. Not making your judgment on what you see. The truth is not an opinion. Let me just rephrase this now. Truth is not an opinion poll. Well, let's vote on this thing. No. Truth is truth in spite of what we see. Truth of the Word is still the truth. That's how it all fits together. Truth is not an opinion poll. You're not listening to a bunch of people give you their opinion. The Bible is the absolute truth. And after Gideon blew the trumpet, 32,000 men showed up. Now remember, the enemy was about 135,000, so he's still outnumbered. So he blows the trumpet, and all these people come together. And it's so interesting, because God had a problem. I love when God has a problem, because I like to see how he solves it. If he let Gideon have 32,000 men, he was considering that Gideon would be bragging, we did it. And sometimes we get taken up with numbers. We get worried about numbers. But I believe this gives us some insight into how God thinks about numbers. This is not a major problem with God, however it is with men. Because if we were out there and we blew the trumpet and 32,000 came, and we knew over on the other side of the hill 135,000 were camped over there, it would still make us wonder. And then if we won the war, God was worrying that we were going to be bragging about winning this war. Look what I've done. Gideon's personality was one of little faith to great faith. Now, you know the story. He was hiding and all this stuff happened, and the angel came and talked to him and got him all going again. He had little faith. If anybody ever had little faith, it was Gideon. There are plenty of Bible stories of one man who turned the tide for God. And sometimes we look at the situation and we think it's just impossible. Who would ever believe that over in Saudi Arabia, right now, as I'm speaking, there are people who are having visions of Jesus? Right now, as I'm speaking, it's happening right now. Now, I can't explain that. I have no explanation for it. But I do know that throughout the Old Testament, that's why I use that verse in 1 Corinthians, that God uses people. And He doesn't use a great amount of people, or it's not based on their greatness. It's based on God's choice. Abraham, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, and Gideon. And there's some real heavyweights there. And sometimes when we think that God, God, we'd like to see God move and send somebody along, I just want to encourage you right now that God may be looking at you. The Bible is filled with men and women who think differently than the average Joe. We think differently than the average Joe. We do in this church. To me, it's a lot like Winston Churchill said in 1941, at the height of when the Germans were bombing London, and they were turned back. They had all these Luftwaffe coming over by the hundreds, bombing the city and bombing around them, and it was chaos in the city. It was on fire, and they were fighting the fire. But there was a small group of fighter pilots, American and English, who would take off from those airports with outnumbered, and they would go up, and they won the air war. They won the air war. And Winston Churchill said this: never has so much been owed to so few. And there's a thing in this story that really got into my spirit this week, and this is why I want to share this with you. Because we face some of the same problems today in the church that Gideon faced. And I believe it's a prophetic word for then, but also for now. Because the Word of God also applies then, but it also applies for today. The first group that He sent away, He said, if you're fearful and you're afraid, go on home. Just go home. Yeah. Just go on. Take off. We don't need you. We don't need you. Go home. And it says thousands left. The second group, now get a hold of this. The second group was unaware of danger. They had no idea why they were being tested on how they drank. Some stuck their head down in the water, and others lapped the water, bringing it up to their face. The third group was on the ready. So you have three groups here. First of all, you have the large group where Gideon says, if you guys are afraid, go on home. Just go on home. So they take off. 22,000. Imagine 22,000 people. That's like about what? Half of the Seahawks stadium? No, maybe a third of it. Just take it off. That left 10,000. And I would have been a little nervous if I was thinking about 10,000. And then they're split down. And then he ends up with a third group, which was 300 men. Now just think about that for a minute. Over on the other side of the mountain, 135 mad warriors, and he's standing over with 300 sheep herders. And his faith was moving now, was moving and getting greater and greater and greater. The first group left because of fear. How many times does fear steal a victory of a promise from us? How many times have we had a promise from God, and then fear comes in and steals that promise out of our life? I know fear. I know what fear is. I know it. I have felt that thing. It's like a demonic spirit that comes upon you. I've been fighting cancer for 7 years. I know fear. I even